before we dive into the most brutally honest assessment of where Alabama football stands right now, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're delivering the unvarnished truth that other channels won't give you. There are moments in sports that force you to confront uncomfortable realities, moments that strip away all the optimism and excuses and leave you staring at the harsh truth. For Alabama football, that moment came on a Saturday night in Tallahassee, and the aftermath has been even more revealing than the game itself. I woke up this morning, against my better judgment, I pulled up my Twitter account, and there it was. Fire Kalen DeBoer. Right there. First thing I saw. All caps, of course. So here's my takeaway from that. Obviously no. Well, it's obvious to me. No, that's not the way the world works. Even if they wanted to fire him, they can't. And in no world should you be talking about firing Kalen DeBoer. However, it is serious gut check time for him and for that program. There's some things you just have to have. Competitive character is one of them. Effort, tenacity, a killer instinct. These should be things that, if you're good enough to warrant a scholarship at Alabama and you wear that crimson helmet, you play at a place where so many guys that exhibited those characteristics have played before, you better have them. And they were so bad yesterday, above and beyond the obvious. They were bad at just having the baseline stuff that everyone should have. They were bad at having the baseline stuff you take for granted if Nick Saban were still there. And the reason it existed when Saban was there was, number one, that was a non-negotiable in the culture that he created. But number two, you ought to be terrified to play that way. Not terrified of what the opponent's going to do to you. You should be terrified about what your own guys are going to do to you behind closed doors. If you put the kind of performance on tape that several of their defensive players put on tape yesterday under Nick Saban, you wouldn't have to worry about what Florida State's going to do to you. You would not have to worry about what your coach is going to do to you. You would have to worry about what your teammates were going to do to you. And I'm not sure that fear exists on that team. It's obvious it doesn't because the same issues still lingered into week one that existed last year. So how could I draw any other conclusion? If anyone wants to get mad at that, I'd love to hear pushback on that. I'm the one who picked you to win the SEC, so I'd love to hear a counter to that. But the criticism is completely fair. Listen, that whole adage that you don't want to be the guy who takes over for a legend is true because most people don't want to take over for a legend. But I always push back on it because I think the guy with the right mentality wants to take over a premium situation regardless of who had the job before. You see the reality of Joe Paterno. Forget about the off-the-field stuff. I don't care what you think about that. Joe Paterno was a successful coach for decades at Penn State, but his best days were well behind him by the time he finally retired. Bobby Bowden ditto at Florida State, but his best days were well behind him by the time he retired. Point being, a lot of times the secret reason you don't want to take over for a legend is because the program has waned in the latter stages of that legend's career, and you're left with inheriting a rebuild with sky-high expectations. Those two things don't mesh because you won't have the patience from the fan base. Kalen DeBoer inherited a program that was not in need of a rebuild, especially relative to FSU post-Bowden, Penn State post-Paterno. That was not this. Nick Saban's last game was a playoff game. Nick Saban's last recruiting class was top 5. Did you lose some guys in the portal? Of course you did. Hey, that's why no one really blames you for a mixed bag of results in year one. But now, man, 2 years in, especially when the vibe we got from inside that place was, we love where we're at. Well, I didn't love what I saw from you in week one. So, look, here's the other thing. People have waited for this for 15 years. No one's letting up. Everyone hates you except your own people. And frankly, some of them will turn pretty quickly if this doesn't get turned around. So none of that should really change what you're about. Your process should be your process. I guess my point there is if I believed in my procedures and systems and processes and I started off a new season delivering the same results, hey, you got to be evaluating yourself all the time as well. I think that about our show just as much as Kalen should think that about Alabama football. Here's the problem. Those are conversations you want to have in January and February, not in week 2 of the season, because it's really tough. There's only so much you can do once the plane's off the ground. There's only so much you can do to fix the plane if it has terminal issues. Interested to see where that goes. There's 11 weeks to go in this season. This is the crossroads moment for Alabama football, not because one game defines everything, but because this game revealed everything. It showed us that the cultural foundation that made Alabama special for over a decade might not exist anymore. It showed us that the fear of disappointing your teammates, the non-negotiable standard of effort, the killer instinct that separated champions from pretenders, all of that might be gone. DeBoer didn't inherit a rebuild. He inherited a machine that needed fine-tuning, not a complete overhaul. But somewhere along the way, the machine broke down, and now we're left wondering if it can be fixed or if it needs to be rebuilt from the scratch. The problem is, Alabama doesn't have the luxury of time or patience that rebuilds require. The expectations are championship or bust, and right now, they look closer to bust than championship. The next 11 weeks will tell us everything we need to know about Kalen DeBoer, about this Alabama team, and about whether the dynasty that Nick Saban built can survive the transition to new leadership. Because right now, it's not looking good. The plane might still be in the air, but it's definitely experiencing some serious turbulence, and everyone's wondering if the pilot knows how to land it safely. If you want to stay on top of every twist and turn in this Alabama saga, you know what to do. Smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and let us know in the comments if you think DeBoer can turn this around or if Alabama's dynasty days are officially over.